A man spends 13 months in prison for a murder he had absolutely nothing to do with. While his life is dismantled by the state, the actual killer remains free to strike again. And the undercover police officer who engineered the false case against the innocent man? She retires early and is financially compensated for her trouble, years before the victim sees a single penny. That man is Colin Stagg. Today, he is in his 60s. He lives alone with his dog. He remains largely unemployable. His daily existence is almost identical to the quiet, isolated life he was living 30 years ago when the police first decided to ruin it. Meanwhile, the people who built the case, the police, the media, the psychological profilers, moved on. They continued their careers and lived their lives. Stagg walked out of the Old Bailey a free man in the eyes of the law. But that legal verdict was only the beginning of a different kind of sentence, one carried out not by the courts, but by the public. In the summer of 1992, Colin Stagg was 28 years old and unemployed. He lived in a flat near Wimbledon Common in southwest London, and he walked his dog along its paths almost every day. He was socially awkward and had few close relationships. He was, by his own admission, a loner. On July 15th of that year, a young mother named Rachel Nickell was murdered on that same common. The police interviewed Stagg because he was a regular presence in the area. He fully cooperated. He had no criminal record, and investigators found zero physical evidence connecting him to the crime. With no physical leads, the police brought in criminal psychologist Paul Britton to develop a profile of the killer. Rather than relying on physical clues, Britton built a theory based on social isolation, specific sexual interests, and behavioral traits. Investigators looked at that behavioral checklist, and then they looked at Stagg. They locked onto him as their prime suspect, not because he left a footprint or a fingerprint, but because his marginal, quiet lifestyle matched their new theory. The police were under immense pressure to find a killer, and now they had a profile that seemed to fit. The focus shifted from finding a suspect based on evidence to proving that their only suspect was the man the profile described. The police decided to manufacture the evidence they couldn't find. In January 1993, they launched an undercover operation. An officer using the fake name Lizzie James contacted Stagg. She wrote him letters. She met him in person. Over several months, she fabricated an intimate, romantic relationship with him. Her instruction from the profiling team was to test Stagg. She implied she needed a man capable of violence. She demanded that Stagg reveal dark sexual fantasies that matched Paul Britton's profile, telling him it was the only way to prove he was the man for her. But the operation failed to produce a confession. Even under intense emotional manipulation, Colin Stagg explicitly and repeatedly denied killing Rachel Nickell. He did eventually describe violent fantasies to Lizzie James, but he later admitted he entirely invented them. He was a deeply lonely man, desperate to appease the only person in his life who seemed to show him any affection. Stagg wasn't offering a confession of guilt. He was offering a performance of intimacy. In his desperation for a connection, he was willing to say whatever he thought the woman he loved wanted to hear. Based on those manipulated conversations, Colin Stagg was arrested in August 1993 and charged with murder. He was remanded to Wandsworth Prison, where he spent 13 months awaiting his trial. Outside his cell, the British tabloid press was holding its own trial. Stagg's face was on every front page. His name became synonymous with the murder in Wimbledon Common. The public was presented with a narrative of guilt that was repeated daily for a year before a single witness was called. The case finally reached the pre-trial phase in September 1994. Mr. Justice Ognall reviewed the state's undercover strategy and threw the evidence out entirely. From the bench of the Old Bailey, the judge labeled the police operation as deceptive conduct of the grossest kind. He stated the trap was designed to incriminate a suspect rather than to discover the truth. The case was dismissed. Stagg walked free. Walking out of a courthouse does not wipe a society's memory. The legal system rejected the police's false narrative, but that ruling was powerless against a public that had already spent a year absorbing that narrative as fact. Stagg's reality after his release was immediately hostile. People who had read the headlines for months had already reached their conclusions. He was spat at in public. He received hate mail. Strangers confronted him in the street, certain they were looking at a killer. The notoriety made him completely unemployable. The moment a prospective employer recognized his name on a resume, the conversation immediately ended. The same recognition destroyed his ability to form new relationships, as his name immediately triggered associations with a murder he had nothing to do with. This timeline graph shows how media retention has changed. In 1994, a tabloid scandal was local and temporary. It faded as papers were thrown away. But as the internet grew, Stagg's notoriety became permanent. Search results now connect his name to the murder forever, regardless of when or where someone searches. Stagg has since described the experience as feeling like it happened to someone else. He emerged from prison with no faith in the justice system, trying to find peace while living with the permanent loss of his privacy and his potential. The legal phrase "innocent until proven guilty" did not apply here. Once the machinery of public accusation was fully engaged, a piece of paper declaring his innocence could not put his life back together. This chart reveals the aftermath's asymmetry. The undercover officer received a £125,000 settlement in 2001, compensated 6 years before Stagg. Paul Britton, the profiling psychologist, faced an inquiry finding substandard conduct, yet received no sanctions and continued practicing. The most devastating failure was revealed in a 2009 Independent Police Complaints Commission report. While investigators were obsessed with Stagg, they had missed multiple opportunities to stop the real killer, Robert Napper. Because the police failed to properly investigate reports about Napper that were available to them at the time, he remained free. While the state focused on Stagg, Napper murdered Samantha Bissett and her daughter. In 2007, Stagg finally received £706,000 in compensation. It covered the 13 months he spent in a cell. It didn't cover 13 years of public vilification or his lost decades of employment and relationships. The tragedy of this frame-up isn't just the power of the state to target an individual. It's the fact that no amount of money or official apologies can restore a life that was successfully and permanently dismantled.